I strongly encourage you to take advantage of these things like the sales program and to get on with some kind of organization, campus organization. The sales team is a great one to do because we pay for you to go to competition. We pay for the flights, the lodging, your entry fees into the competition, and it's an awesome opportunity to network with companies that have paid literally thousands and thousands of dollars to be there at those career fairs. So they are highly motivated to recruit students and get them jobs. They pay, I think for NCSC, the companies pay, I think, a sponsorship fee of about $35,000 just to be there. So they're spending a lot of money just to come and talk to you. And it's a great opportunity to meet them and network and get job offers. We've had, I don't think any of our students that have gone to competition that haven't gotten some kind of job offer from the companies at the competitions. Now, some of them they didn't want, they got others when they came back to Oklahoma, but it's still a really great opportunity to do it. And it's a lot of fun. You get to go and travel in the school time. You pay a lot in fees here, which we're talking about price today. So this is important, right? That's the price of coming here. And we give some of that money back to you by doing these things and sponsoring these trips that you should take advantage of while you have the opportunity and the freedom to do so. So I highly encourage you. Thank you, sir. I want you to sign this. You have to take for the major, you have to, in addition to advanced professional selling, you have to take negotiations, business to business, purchasing, because that's the other side of the equation, so that you really learn about what it's like to deal with business to business purchasing. And I'm trying to think, I've got a blanket more of it, but I'll get you the thing here, the sales management, sales force management. All right, so again, I'm going to drop one chapter from the exam, that would be channels. We'll talk about price. So price is a critically important aspect of the 4 Ps, right? Because this is where it all comes together. Price is where all other business decisions are reflected. It has to be right, and it's what you are willing to sacrifice to get a good or service. What are you willing to sacrifice? You all are sacrificing for the price of this education. What are you sacrificing? Time. Sleep. You could be at home doing something else. Your hard-earned money. You could have a job. You could be making money. So you're willing to sacrifice that in exchange for what? The opportunity cost is what? Yeah, I mean the opportunity cost is you're sacrificing all these things for time, sleep, friendship, getting a job, so that you have the opportunity to get a better job in the future. Price doesn't necessarily have to be monetary, right? We can have an exchange and you still have a price component even if you don't have money. So one of the biggest ways that happens is through barter, and this is particularly true in international trade. So for example, anybody know what the currency of Kenya is? It's called the shilling. How many people want a Kenyan shilling? Not good for anything outside of Kenya. So companies or businesses may engage in barter, exchange of goods or services, raw product for example maybe, in exchange for other things if they don't have a currency that people readily want. What's the world's reserve currency, the hard currency in the world?
US dollars.
The US dollar is the world's reserve currency. So most people in most business transactions that involve money, they want what? They want US dollars, right? Because it's a hard currency. But barter can be used as well. It's and it accounts for billions and billions and billions of dollars in domestic and international trade. this exchange of products and goods and services. I've even done it in my business. One of the things that Southwest wanted to do was they wanted to have a promotion for, and I talked about branding and living the brand before, and Southwest is a prime example of living the brand. They wanted to offer a promotion to their top salespeople in the Oklahoma City area and their gate agents, and so they offered them Murder Mysteries and Stone Lion Inn, which is my company. In exchange, they gave us flight vouchers so that we could fly on Southwest for free, so that it didn't, cost them anything. They didn't have to 1099 us. The price equation equals, and you need to know this for the exams, the list price minus incentives and allowances plus extra fees. So think about this. How many of you have bought a car? Okay, you bought a car. What did you do when you bought the car? What's a car price look like? Yours was used, no. Anybody bought a new car from a car dealer? Okay, what did the price look like? The what? Okay, so there's this manufacturer suggested retail price, right, on the sticker, and then they have what? Then they have all of this other stuff that's listed down below. Things like dealer prep. What is dealer prep? No one knows. It's the stickers that they put on that say John Vance Motors, or the license plate tag, or the cost of keeping it on their lot. So you negotiate a price. A lot of times they will have incentives and rebates, like what? So if you buy a new car, for example, a lot of times they'll have that, but they'll also have, for example, if you're a repeat customer of Ford Motor Credit, I got $2,000 in customer loyalty rebates the last time I bought a Ford pickup, because it's the fourth one I bought. And then they have other incentives and floor plans that get taken off, and then add into that the dealer prep and all of that stuff that you pay for, and that's how you come up with the price equation. So list price minus incentives and allowances plus extra fees. Price is an indication of value. And value, the value equation is the perceived benefits that you get divided by the price. 84% of people said that price is an indicator of what? Have a quality. Is it an indicator of quality? One of the things in chapter 15 or 14, one of the models for pricing is prestige pricing, and we talked about this, and this is a test question a lot. Tag Heuer raised their prices, this is mentioned in the text, from 250 to 1,000, and their sales went up. So normally, when we think about demand in the pricing arena, right? Obviously, demand is important because if you have no demand for your product, and one of the reasons that many businesses fail is because they don't have any demand for their product. Why? Too much competition, maybe it's not unique enough, it doesn't fulfill a service or requirement that people have. So you have the demand curve, and generally speaking, and this is an example of using prestige pricing, where it doesn't follow the theoretical model. Generally, demand is an inverse curve, right? And the more you charge, the less people are generally going to demand. And you have to remember, when I was first hired here at UCO, I got really tired of listening to Dr. Caldwell across the hallway from me, who was an economist, say, you have to remember that demand is the entire curve. Demand is the entire curve. So you can have movement along the demand curve. If a business decides to drop their price, for example, generally speaking, more quantity will be demanded. That's movement down the curve. The curve is the whole thing. Now you can also have a shift in the entire curve. So for example, you could have a shift to the right, and what could lead to a shift in the demand curve? So that at every price you now have a higher quantity demanded. More resources. The economy could improve. People's unemployment, could end, and they get a better job, right? We're in an era right now where we had a recession, and we came out of the recession, and what is unemployment right now? It's about 5.5% nationally, which is almost full employment. They consider 5% to be full employment because in that 5% you have a lot of times people who are still actively looking for a job, or they're between jobs, they're transitioning from one job. Things like you graduate from college and you're looking for a job. Maybe you had a job as barista in Starbucks in the student union, and you quit that job so that you can go out. Now you've got your professional sales major, and you get a better job. That's considered full employment. In Oklahoma, we have slightly better than that, although it's decreasing in Oklahoma slightly. The employment rate is decreasing in Oklahoma because why? Oil prices have fallen, and so they're not doing what? They're not drilling as much as they were even a year ago. So that would, in that instance, if we experience unemployment in Oklahoma that increases, that might cause the demand curve to shift to the left, and there would be less quantity demanded at every price along the curve. Right? If we have more people employed, there might be more demand. You could increase demand by increasing advertising. If people see a product, they learn about a product, and they want more of it, you could have that happen. Decoding the price equation. A lot of times, this is not easy. And consumers take, and this is one of the things that you should be aware of in shopping for yourself, and we train consumers to actually respond to various types of incentives. And so JCPenney, about 2 years ago, decided that they were going to stop doing all the sales. Why do you think they decided that they were going to do that? They were going to become just the everyday low price model. And it was a horrible failure. Because what did they train their customer to do? They had trained their customer to respond to store coupons and sales. The same way Macy's has. Macy's has got a perpetual sale on all the time. And a lot of times they'll offer incentives even within the sale. So let's suppose you want a leather bomber jacket, and the bomber jacket sells for $100. And they say take an additional, it's marked off 25%, and then take an additional 25% at the register. Does that mean that the jacket is $50? 50%. What is it? Yeah, so you have to take 25% off the list price, which is what? $75, and then you take 25 off of 75, and what you end up with is $56.25. So it's not 50. But consumers do, a lot of times, they'll do this mental shortcut, and they'll just add the percentages together, and that's not an accurate reflection of what they're getting. So you have to be a smart shopper. Things like BOGOs. What's a BOGO? Buy one, get one half off. Buy one, get one free. Things like that. Price, of course, in the marketing mix affects both revenues and total costs. The profit equation is unit price times the quantity sold minus fixed costs and variable costs. So profit, you should know this for the exam, equals unit price times quantity minus fixed plus variable costs. What are fixed costs? Things like what? What kinds of building, right? If you have a building, this is a fixed cost for the university. We built this building, and whether or not you come to UCO or not, we still have this cost. What's the variable cost in here?
Like gas in a car, like the more you drive it.
In this classroom, what's the variable cost?
Electricity.
Electricity, maybe during the summertime we have to do what? We have to cool it more. During the winter we have to heat it. That can change. What else is a variable cost?
Professor.
Yeah, professors. If I don't have any students, I don't have a job, right? If I don't have a job, they're not spending that money on my salary, so that's a variable cost. If we have a class in here every single day, our fixed costs for the building don't change, but what does change? The salaries that we're paying for our professors, right? So pricing objectives. Price is so important in marketing, but there's no one single unifying theory as to why you should use one price objective over another. It often depends on the type of business, competitive environment that the business is in, and what their goals are. So you might have, and a lot of American firms are accused of managing for short term, managing their price objectives for the short term. And this occurred all the time in the company that I worked for, the American Education Corporation, because we focused on target return on investment and sales revenues quarter over quarter. Why do you suppose we did that? Why do you suppose particularly publicly traded companies in the United States a lot of times are accused of this short-sighted, focusing on increasing sales revenues quarter over quarter or year over year in publicly traded companies? What's a publicly traded company?
If you use your stockholders.
Okay, and one that's traded on an exchange and therefore has to be reporting to the SEC. What do reporting companies file? How many of you are accounting majors?
Is it the
10-10.
Okay, the 10K and what else? The 10Q, which are the quarterly reports. Really boring. I had to file these. I had to produce these when I was general counsel. It's horribly boring. But people, because those are public, people can see those, and so a lot of times businesses, in order to keep their stock prices up, will focus on that generation of revenue quarter over quarter, year over year, because those are public. And a lot of times, it's not necessarily the best way to manage your profit. So managing for return on investment, ROI, sales, increasing the sales revenue, market share. Market share is a ratio of the firm's sales revenues or units to those of the entire industry. And in many instances, we talked about this last time with one of you that did McDonald's as their group project. You did McDonald's, you all did McDonald's, right? What did I tell you? McDonald's market share has nowhere to go but what? Down. They're the 500-pound gorilla in the room. They're not going to add a whole lot. So what are they trying to do to stay relevant? And this is how this all integrates in. We talked about branding and things like that, and maybe repositioning themselves. What has McDonald's tried to do that I've suggested in here in order to at least maintain their market share? With their buildings, what have they done? They're looking more and more like Starbucks, aren't they? They're looking more sophisticated, more sleek. When I was a kid growing up, what did McDonald's look like? Yeah, it was like this hut-type building with this funny roof, and they had what? Playgrounds out front so that you could bring your kids. And they had those, did any of you ever play in the ball pits? Horribly unsanitary. You know, I mean, they're just a breeding ground of bacteria. Urine and fecal matter when they test, when they swab for bacteria on those. It's incredible what you find. So McDonald's has done what? They've gotten rid of a lot of that stuff. And they're now trying to, I don't know how successful it will be, but market share. Unit volume, which is a focus on the quantity produced or sold. And this can be counterproductive if you're selling. And then finally, a lot of firms, again, are in a survival mode. FAO Schwartz is what your textbook talks about. That was a toy company, like Toys R Us, except more kind of high-end. They were in the Plaza District, for example, in Kansas City. I can remember that. They had this huge, big teddy bear as their sort of mascot outside the store. And they went broke. Why? And so at the end there, they were just trying to sell. Why did they go broke, do you suppose? They were competing with low-cost providers like Walmart, who has a huge toy section, so they were in survival. Price constraints. The cost of producing and marketing is a price constraint. In the long run, some businesses, when we talk about pricing objectives, will price things so that they're not making a huge profit margin in order to gain entry into the market. But overall, you have to have some profitability, otherwise the business itself will eventually do what? Fail. And a huge percentage of businesses do fail. The stages of the product life cycle also influence the amount of money you can charge. You might start, what did Apple do when it launched the Apple iPhone? What kind of strategy? This is a demand-oriented strategy. Do they use skimming? Skimming is where you skim the cream off the top, right? When the milk comes out of the cow, it's not what you get in the supermarket, is it? What do they do with it?
Pasteurize.
They pasteurize it, they also do what? They separate, so you have heavy cream. That's the stuff that's really thick. You can add sugar to and make it into a heavy whipping cream. They have half and half. They homogenize it so that it has the same consistency throughout. So you skim off the cream. And was Apple using a skimming or a penetration when they released the iPhone? Penetration is you start with a low initial price, and then you try to get into the market, and then you raise the price. What did Apple do with their iPhone? They used a skimming strategy. And I told my friends at the time, I had friends that waited, because they are Apple fanatics, to get the first iPhone when it first came out. And they were so excited. That was back when MySpace was still popular. And they posted on MySpace the picture of their new Apple iPhone. And I said, it'll drop. And it did. It dropped in 3 months. They dropped the price. Was it worth it to have it? They insisted that it was worth every moment of being able to be the first ones, because they were innovators on their street, on their block. They liked to be up with the latest technology. They insisted that it was worth the premium pricing. So the product life cycle. If you are at the end of the product life cycle, you might engage in a harvesting strategy. Single product versus product lines. And this is an example of how you may have differences of opinions within a firm. And I've alluded to this before as well. One of the things that we did in the company that I worked for was we had a product line that we lost money on. It was called Learning Letter Sounds, and I think I told you all this before. But we lost money on it, and the accountants always wanted us to just end the product line. And we said, no. This is the reason the marketers look at things differently from accountants, because that product got us in the door, particularly with school districts that might be struggling because of their funding. What's happening right now that's affecting funding in Oklahoma? We're generally at the bottom of the list in terms of school funding. How do we fund our schools? Property taxes. What can happen if businesses go out of a community? They lose that tax revenue maybe. And so it can affect the property value. So if schools are struggling, they can afford to buy Learning Letter Sounds, and then they knew us, we got our foot in the door, and next year, or the next budget cycle, if they had more money, or they got more Title III funds from the federal government, they could then afford to go in and buy our advanced learning system. But it was a great product to get us in the door, and so we had this product line, and that affected what types of prices we charged, whether or not we just had one single product versus an entire product line. The types of competitive market affect the price. Pure competition, you have lots and lots of sellers. So you generally have similar prices. Are the gas prices at gas stations in Edmond radically different from each other? They're usually within what? Yeah, they're usually within a few cents of each other. Why? Do people actually, it's a total commodity. Do people care where they get their gas? Are they brand loyal? Does she have a Shell card or something
No,
like that?
she only goes to the Valero for no reason that I can understand.
Okay. Most people are not, unless they have something like, what does Shell try to do to get brand loyalty and get you to go to Shell?
They have like a money back.
They have a money back. If you use their card, you get a discount at the pump.
Like what, 3 cents?
Yeah, I think it's 3 cents a gallon.
Well, everywhere is that.
So if you have that kind of market where you have lots of sellers, you've got Valero, you've got Shell. What else do we have? On-Q, 7-Eleven, and then just a host of other small mom and pop shops. They're all going to be within a similar price. And you can do what now with modern cell phone technology in terms of finding the cheapest gas? Get on Gas Buddy and find where the cheapest in your area is. How many of you do that? And go to the cheapest place that you possibly can. Absolutely. So pure competition. Now in Stillwater, the prices for gas for years and years and years, when my brother was a student at OSU, were always much higher than the rest of the state. Why do you think that was? Huh? It's because there were two guys who owned all of the gas stations in Stillwater.
And they had deals.
And they had, in that instance, you don't have pure competition, you have an oligopoly. It was amazing how they had breakfast with each other once a week, and the prices were always much higher in Stillwater. That's, of course, illegal. It's called price fixing, and it's generally a crime if they catch you. But what's the risk?
Very low.
Probably pretty low. Are you going to be able to prove anything? But the prices in Stillwater, because it wasn't a pure competition, were always much higher than they were in, say, Guthrie or Edmond. So that oligopoly, few sellers, generally and this is what these two guys did, they tried to avoid competition because it would just lead to price wars. And they had the luxury of doing that. Who operates in an oligopoly and they try to avoid price wars?
Airlines.
Airlines. They know what routes are profitable for each of the airlines. You know who the competition is. There are very few providers out there, and they try to avoid price going head to head. So for example, Southwest primarily flies where? They primarily flew in the Southwest. They've now expanded that. But that was their roots, were in the Southwest. And so they knew what American was doing, what Delta was doing, and they avoided head-on competition with those routes that were more profitable for them. They also use yield management systems in airlines and hotels. So what is that? It's a complex system that they use to set prices based on demand. So peak times. If you can fly, if you're flexible in your flying dates, you can generally get better prices because some days are better than others to fly. What's a good day to generally fly back, for example? Sunday or Monday? It's usually Sunday. It's slightly cheaper on Sunday. Why?
Because most people don't want to fly on Sunday.
Because you're competing with the business traveler. And is it the business traveler, are they price sensitive? Which leads me to my discussion of elasticity of demand. Our business travelers, generally, they have to get there. So they'll pay what they have to pay. And And there's a lot of business travel that starts on Mondays, right?
Yeah, you're definitely paying for it. You're not gonna be worried about price.
Right. But pleasure travelers are. And so if you can schedule your vacation to take advantage of those times, just try playing around. How many of you have done that with the travel sites? Travelocity or Southwest Airlines online reservation system. Just try different dates. They also have a feature on Southwest and all the other airlines that will say, they'll give you a grid of where you're going and give you the price management breakdown for the day. If you look at that. Consumer tastes and demand. How fast can these change? Apple was the largest share, or had the largest market share of the smartphone industry until recently. Why have they lost some of that? Is Samsung a better product? You don't think so? You're shaking your head no. You have an iPhone? How many of you have iPhones? A lot of people are switching. Why? Apple's expensive. How have they started pricing the bundles at the carriers now? What have they recognized? There's been a paradigm shift in the pricing model of smartphones and plans. They have gone from, it used to be that they would practically give you the hardware in exchange for you doing what? Signing a 2-year contract with the carrier so that you couldn't switch. Now what are they doing? They're competing on no contract, but they're charging you what? A higher percentage of the cost of the hardware. And Apple is generally more expensive. Apple has made a lot of money on their hardware. So they're generally a higher price. So there's been a lot of switching in that area, in that market. Revenue is, of course, important to pricing. In your total revenue, you should know these definitions and how to calculate them for the exam, is price times quantity. Average revenue is the total revenue divided by quantity. So what's the average revenue per unit? And for a lot of companies, this varies because, again, they give discounts maybe for bulk. If you buy Coca-Cola in a case, is the price more or less expensive than if you buy a 6-pack? It's generally less expensive for that quantity discount. Marginal revenue is the change that results from producing one additional unit of the product. So as long as it's still profitable, you will continue to grow, but there comes a point at which what? You can't maybe produce anymore and still make a profit. We talked about elasticity. You should know the definitions of elastic, which is an increase in price results in a large decrease in demand. Your text says things like gasoline are inelastic, where a percentage change doesn't lead to a huge percentage change in the quantity demanded. Is that true? Is gas really inelastic?
To an extent. I mean, if the price goes up a lot one week, you might wait until next week to buy gas, but at a certain point, you have to buy gas to get where you're going and you will. But over the long term, you might get more gas with your car or electric car.
One of the things that they have studied, and they did Harvard did a study, and they were talking about this on NPR, that demonstrates the elasticity of gas prices, is that for every decrease of 50 cents in the price of a gallon of gas, the number of accidents on the road increases something like tenfold. So the more expensive, the lowest number of accidents that we had in this country occurred right when the gas prices reached almost $4 a gallon. Why do you suppose that is? Now, if gas prices are at $4 a gallon, particularly for people like myself who drive large vehicles, like a truck, I have two big trucks, I have a Ford F-150 and a Ford F-350, what do? You don't drive as fast as gas prices are approaching $4 a gallon. You do what? When you're getting on and off, you accelerate much more slowly. If gas prices drop to $2 a gallon, what do people do? Yeah, I mean, they slam on the gas and pull out and cause all kinds of problems. So there is a direct relation between accidents and the price of gas. If there's a 1-for-1, it's unitary. We talked about skimming, penetration, prestige pricing, price lining. Price lining assumes, these are demand-oriented pricing models. Price lining assumes that demand is inelastic between the price points, but price elastic within the category. So you might have, for example, shoes in a department store that are priced your top tier, sort of middle tier, your bottom tier. And are those shoes generally, for the most part, manufactured in all the same places? They are. They're generally manufactured where? In the same factories. Does Nike actually make their own product? They don't. Nike is a what? It's a design. It's a design firm. They design the shoes and then they outsource the manufacturing of those shoes to where? China, Taiwan, places like that. And are they manufacturing the same shoes for Nike as they're manufacturing for New Balance, Adidas, things like that? Absolutely. Odd-even pricing. It assumes that consumers view $39.99 as what? Something less than 40 bucks. And it can be effective, but if it's overused, it seems to have a diminishing effect. Bundle, things like cable companies bundle home, phone, internet, cable subscription. And if you take the bundle, you get a discount. How many of you have a home phone because you got a bundle? Nobody? One person? Cost-oriented, there's standard markup. Again, there's not one price strategy that fits everything. Who does cost plus generally? Supermarkets. They just do cost plus of what they buy the product for plus a certain percent. Experience curve pricing. As technology advances, prices may fall. You can also have a profit-oriented philosophy where you go for a target profit, return on assets, or target return on investment. In some industries, in some fields, you have customary. These are competition-oriented. What does a Coke cost in the vending machine down the hall in the student lounge? Is it $1.50? Why is that? That's what you're used to paying, right? For a Coke in a vending machine is $1.50. To what? Some places it's maybe $2. Hotels. What are you used to paying in the hotel in the vending machine? $2. Why? They've got a captive audience. They can charge more. Right? At, above, or below pricing. And then finally, loss leader. You price something below what somebody else is selling it in order to get them into the store. Supermarkets do this, and they used to do this all the time. And it used to be really funny to watch. You could watch the people at Walmart used to send people out to Target to do comp shopping. And in the 80s and 90s, they did this so frequently. And it became, you would see the management at Target going up and saying, get out of the store because we know what you're doing, you're comp shopping. And they start writing down prices in a notebook, and they become very very suspicious. It's hard to prevent people from doing that now, from doing comp shopping, because they can do what? Yeah, you can take your cell phone in and just start, clicking on pictures and stuff and prices. So, all right. So if you want to, got 10 minutes. If you want to turn on your things and put them up here, I'll try to get through this as quickly as I can. If I don't, get through all of it, I'll list some others. I'll list what I didn't get to in class. I'll try to stand still. We talked about brands and brand management. We talked about typologies of brands, things like alphanumeric brands, geographic brands, name, individual-based brands, person-based branding, things like that. You should know who came up with that typology. And what I added to that typology, which is that there's also theme-based branding. You should know what descriptive brands are, and associative brands. I talked about 3 authors with regard to branding. 2 together, Turley and Moore, that developed the typology, and then Kevin Lane Keller, who talks about brand management. Once you develop your brand, what you need to do to keep it relevant. You should know what the attributes of brand management are. How to be successful. Things like you should do what with your brand. Give it proper support. Use the full source of marketing mix. We talked about product life cycle. Again, this relates to pricing. So you should know at which stage in the life cycle you might want to harvest. When is harvesting a viable option? What happens in the first stage of the product life cycle? There's a new technology that comes out, for example, when Apple released the iPod, very few competitors. You should know what the objective is for the growth and maturity phase, what happens to competition, generally speaking, in those phases. You should know about product classes, product lines. You should know the difference between types of demand, derived demand. We talked about services, and I mentioned an author who argues that all goods are really services. That's Mary Jo Bittner. What's one type of product that we may value in and of itself that I talked about? You need to know the 4 I's. services. Things like the inventory costs of services make them different from products. If I have a camera on my shelf that I'm selling and it doesn't get bought today, I may still sell it tomorrow. Is that true with services? No. If I'm not billing as a lawyer right now, what am I doing? Right now, I'm not billing as an attorney. Sitting here talking to you, can I ever get this hour and a half back? No, it's gone. What makes services difficult to evaluate and standardize? How you can reduce the inventory carrying cost? Of services? Services can be classified in a number of ways according to your text. You should know those. An equipment-based service may differ from an individual-based service. How? How can people evaluate services? What's the gaps? The dimensions of service quality that are talked about in the text, there are 5 of those that you should know. With regard to price, that a lot of times it's not necessarily just money, it can be other things. Barter. Know the price equation that we talked about today, definition of value, the profit equation, what pricing objectives refer to, understand market share, return on investment, return on assets, what a pricing constraint is, the product life cycle and its application to pricing constraints. You should know the demand-oriented types of pricing, profit-oriented, and be able to distinguish between those types of pricing strategies. Why would you set price at a number of specific points for price lining. What odd-even pricing is based on? What kind of psychological factor? Bundle pricing. And again, the differences between the cost, profit approach to pricing, things like that. Do you all have any questions? I guess I made it to the end. Yeah. And for those of you who feel cheated by the fact that I let you go early before, I kept you 1 minute after. So you got your money. Yes, sir.
What is that?
It was pricing. It's like 11 through